You're listening to The Head Trash Show with the founder of Head Trash, Alexia Leachman. Head Trash is the home to the new and unique Head Trash clearance method that removes unwanted negative thoughts, feelings and emotions quickly and effectively so that you can achieve clarity, confidence and contentment in your life. Tune in every week as Alexia shares insights and simple strategies to help you create some headspace to experience confidence and clarity in your life and business. To find out how to clear your head trash quickly and effectively using our unique method, pop over to www.headtrash.co.uk to get our free download and subscribe for our free head trash clearance updates. And now for the show.
Hello and welcome back to the Head Trash Show. This is me, your host, Alexia Leachman, and thank you so much for joining me today. Now, in today's show, I'm going to talk about how you can have a stress-free pregnancy. So, sorry guys, if you're not pregnant, then you might not want to hear this one. But if you've got a pregnant woman in your life, then do show her the show because she will want to listen to this episode. There's some really, really juicy, important stuff to hear. But actually, guys, you might want to hear it because you'll get a little bit of an insight. If your other half is pregnant, you'll get a little bit of an insight as to what she's going through and how you can help her. Mainly by asking her to listen to this episode. So today I'm going to talk about how you can have a stress-free pregnancy. So the kind of things I'm going to talk about are why it's important to clear your stress in pregnancy, how I distinguish between two types of stress and why it's important to distinguish between those two types when it comes to pregnancy. I'm going to touch on some common pregnancy stresses, but also then how to clear your stresses. And some of them are probably going to be fears, if I'm perfectly honest too. So why is it important for you to clear your stress in pregnancy? Well, first off, you'll have a much better pregnancy. You'll be less stressed. Life is much better when you're not so stressed. So that is an obvious one, but it is worth mentioning because we don't always remember to just enjoy life as it is without all that distraction stuff getting in the way. So yes, if you take the time to clear your stresses and reduce them, then life is much sweeter. And that makes life worth the living, right? Now, the second thing, which is really, really important, is the link. There's a known link between the mental and emotional well-being of the mother and the health and emotional well-being of the child. So, a mother who is super stressed, super anxious, that will mean she's more likely to give birth to a child that's got things like hay fever, allergies, asthma, eczema, all that kind of rubbish. Now, this is something that's quite close to my heart because my mum was super stressed when she was pregnant with me and I was born with all that stuff. I was covered in eczema as a child. I had hay fever. I was allergic to animals, dust, pollen. I mean, you name it, I was allergic to it. And the whole sort of hay fever, asthma, eczema trio is just a nightmare to live with. You get bullied at school. Your skin is I'm not going to go on about it, but it's horrid. And that is the last thing I would want for my child. So if this is one thing that really drove me to want to clear my stress in my pregnancy was that I didn't want my children to be covered in stuff like that. And if there was something that I could possibly do that might mean that they don't get that, then I was going to give it a shot because it's worth doing that for the sake of the health and well-being of your child. So yeah, there is a known link. There's loads of evidence research out there to say that there is a link between anxious and stressed mothers and the health and well-being of the child when they're born. So for me, that's like a major reason that you should want to do this. Now, the other reason, again, which links back to you having a better time in your pregnancy, is the fact that your hormones are going to go crazy. My second pregnancy, my first trimester was a nightmare. My hormones just went off the charts and my head was not my own. It was awful. One of the reasons I had to put this podcast on hold was the hormones. But the thing about hormones, what I learned when I was going through that was that hormones exaggerate your own state of mind. So if you're in a good place, generally, then your hormones, yes, they're going to rock the boat a bit, but you're going to be more able to sort of stay solid in yourself and not be rocked too much by it if you're in a good place. Whereas if there's even an inkling of not a good place showing on any level, then your hormones are just they're gonna smell the fear and they're gonna go for you. So you really do not want to give your hormones anything to go for at all. And so that's why it's also really important to try and reduce how you're responding to the stresses in your life, because if you don't, then your hormones are just going to ravage them and turn it into this big, crazy, horrible thing that's going to be really difficult emotionally for you to cope with. And if you're really struggling emotionally because of the hormones, then that's going to really impact on how your body is experiencing that stress, and therefore it's going to have an impact on the baby. So that's why it's also really important, because your hormones are going to magnify whatever emotions you're experiencing. So if you can take the time to reduce the negative ones, then you're going to be reducing the overall damage limitation exercise. That's a nice way of calling it, right? Now, the other thing, which is also quite a biggie actually, is this, and you are improving your chances for a more positive birth experience. And birth experiences, we've all heard, some of them can be pretty shocking, horrific, painful, nightmare, traumatic, all of that stuff. And yes, they can be. However, they don't have to be. It is possible to have an incredibly positive birth experience. And I can say that because I've had 2 incredibly positive birth experiences, but I have worked at it. I have really done a shed load of work to help make that happen. They don't just happen to you. You have to kind of want it and go for it. And I wanted it and I went for it. And positive birth experience for me meant having a pain-free birth experience. And that's what I had. And I put a lot of that down to the fact that I spent my time clearing my stresses and my fears in pregnancy. So when I came to the time of the birth, I had no stress or fear left in my body. There was nothing for adrenaline to hold on to at that point. And so I was able to allow my body to do what it needed to do. So if you do take the time to clear your stresses and your fears in your pregnancy, then when you get to the tail end of it, the thing that you're basically in this for, the birth, then you're more likely to help bring about a more positive birth experience for yourself. Now, I will be doing a separate podcast on positive birth experiences and what I did exactly about reducing the pain in childbirth and some of the really important stuff that you need to understand in order to really make that happen for yourself. But I'm not going to go into that today. So back to stress. So there are 2 types of stresses that I think are really important to think about in pregnancy particularly. And that's this. You've got the sort of stress of the mind, and that's that chitter-chatter stuff. That stuff that kind of takes up your mental space, stops you from sleeping because you're thinking about it, you're mulling it over, all that kind of stuff. And that's really worth putting aside and really trying to quash that. But actually, you do need to do some of that thinking in pregnancy, because your life is about to change forever. If it's your first child, for sure. If it's your second, there's still some massive changes that are going to be coming. And if it's your third, fourth, well, my goodness, you are brave. That's all I can say about people that have that many kids. So yes, there's the chitter chatter bit. So yes, you'll need to, some of the stresses, that you have in pregnancy, and they tend to change throughout your pregnancy. I'm going to talk about a little bit more about the stresses throughout your trimesters a bit later. But essentially, you are trying to figure stuff out, so some of this sort of mental churning is important, because your subconscious is trying to figure all this stuff out and find a way through. And so what you find is when you get to a certain point in your pregnancy that, that sort of chitter chatter bit rises for a bit as you try and figure stuff out and wrestle with it and understand it and get used to it, and then it kind of subsides. But the other type of stress that I think is really worth considering or being aware of is the stress on your body. And that is going to be determined by how you're responding to certain situations when you're pregnant. Because when you're stressed, that's when the adrenaline kicks in, when you have that fight or flight response, that the adrenaline kicks in and you've got cortisol running through your veins, and that is the stuff that's damaging for baby. So, yes, you've got that mind chitter chatter stuff, but actually it's the stress within your body that you really need to be trying to keep a lid on. And so changing how you respond to stuff while you're pregnant is really important, because you can reduce the level of adrenaline that's flooding your system, and therefore reduce the adrenaline that goes through the placenta into baby. And so that's the bit that really needs to work on. So, for example, I want to run through some common pregnancy stresses that might be the kind of thing that's going to be affecting you. Now, the biggie for me in your first trimester, sure, you're going to be that shock moment where you're just discovered that you're pregnant. But the biggie in your first trimester is the stress of having a miscarriage, or the fear. If you've had one already, then that's going to be a big one. And obviously, you're going to want to do everything you can to prevent that from happening again, or really avoid it, because a miscarriage is truly horrific. And it's also not pleasant for the guys too. They don't get enough sympathy when they have to go through this stuff, but really, the guys really go through loss as well as the women. So this is something that guys can do too, But the thing about having a miscarriage or fearing a miscarriage is that you can really change how your body is responding to that fear and that stress, because you really want to try and help your body do the best it can at that time. And so you don't want to sort of make that task any harder for it by being in a stressed state. So sure, you can't eliminate the risk of a miscarriage, but what you can do is change how you feel about the risk and how you're responding to that risk. And if you can be in a much more relaxed state, then hopefully you will mitigate that risk. And it's a bit of another damage limitation when, doing everything that you can to make sure that your pregnancy is a successful pregnancy. But then, going on to your second trimester, you're going to have all sorts of stuff. I mean, you're proper pregnant now, your body's going to be changing, so you're probably going to be stressed about your clothes not fitting, having to buy new clothes, how people are now starting to describe your body openly and describe the fact that you look huge, oh, aren't you big, and all this stuff that you really don't necessarily need to hear. But you are going to hear it. So rather than getting annoyed when you hear that stuff and getting into a bit of a frenzy and tensing your shoulders and, all that kind of response, then if you neutralise those stresses, then you can hear that stuff without having the body response that comes with it. And that's the important thing. It's about getting rid of that stress body response. So yeah, you've got all that stuff about, and then you've got your working life. My God, your working life's going to be turned upside down. Are you going to have to stop work? Are you going to have to be a stay-at-home mum? Are you going to have to go part-time? You've got to tell the people at work. How are people going to take it at work? What's going to happen to your job? What about money? There's all that stuff that's going to be going through your head in your second trimester as you kind of get to grips with your pregnancy. And as you've probably made through from that, the miscarriage thing's now faded away. Now it's all that practical stuff. You're like, this is really happening. Oh my God, how am I going to cope? So there's all that stuff that kicks in. But then the final trimester, this is when there's some really juicy stresses and fears that kick in at this stage. And most namely, your mind starts focusing on the due date and the birth. And my goodness, there's a whole heap of stresses and fears lumped into that, let me tell you. So yeah, again, how you feel about the birth, any fears you have around the birth, this is all stuff that you really need to write down and start clearing. And of course, I'm going to say this, if you haven't been listening to the podcast before, this podcast is all about helping you to make the best out of our 5-step process and to clear the stresses and fears in your life so that you can live awesomely, be happy, be content, be focused, determined, productive, all those great things that you can be when your mind isn't full of crap. So, when it comes to pregnancy, what is an awesome version of pregnancy? Well, an awesome version of pregnancy is being stress-free and having a positive birth experience. That's the kind of if you can come out having an amazing pregnancy, an amazing birth experience, then you are going to feel like you're on fire when you are a mum. You're going to be loaded with confidence, loaded with, you're going to be feeling empowered about the birth. You're probably going to avoid things like postnatal depression, because that affects more likely to affect you if you've had a negative birth experience, a traumatic birth experience, if you've been super stressed during a pregnancy. And if you've got postnatal depression, then that's not going to do great stuff for your mothering, the child, parenting, all that stuff. Really by focusing on taking the time to get yourself into a really great mental state during your pregnancy can really give you, my goodness, the benefits are just so far-reaching. It's incredible, just for you in terms of protecting your future mental health and well-being by potentially avoiding things like postnatal depression, but also by giving your little one the best start in life by hopefully avoiding some of the nightmare things that they could get as a result of you being stressed. So, working on this stuff is really, really important. And so when you think about what is stressing you in your pregnancy, what are your fears, write them down, create your own pregnancy head trash clearance to-do list and work on this stuff, because it's worth clearing and it is worth making the effort to do so. It really is super important. And the thing is, I want to sort of really also share with you that this stuff works. This is exactly what I did throughout my pregnancy. I did this throughout my first pregnancy. I basically mapped out every single fear and stress that I had. And my goodness, I was drowning under my fears and stress at that point. This is, I was still very much somebody that was completely full of head trash. I'm not fully free of head trash right now, let me tell you, because loads of new stuff keeps piling in all the time. But my goodness, I was in a proper stress state. And I was very methodical about this. I'd write it all out and I'd clear my stuff one by one. And eventually, I got to a place where I was able to have a pain-free birth experience at home that was a very, very quick birth. And I never thought for a minute that would be possible for me. I was lining myself up to have every single drug under the sun for my birth experience in a hospital, surrounded by every medic concerned. I never thought in a million years that I'd be able to do that at home without drugs. in in under 6 hours. So this is something that really does work. This is exactly what I did. So this is what you need to do. Write down everything that stresses you out during your pregnancy. Seriously, write it down in a list. On your phone, if you woke up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep, what's keeping you up? Get your phone out, write it on your phone. Keep a little list. I've got on my iPhone, I use the Notes app, and that's my never-ending head trash list. So just start your pregnancy list and write it down. And then put some time aside every day, maybe 10, 15 minutes, and clear something. I would always clear my stuff last thing at night. I could never get to sleep easily when I was pregnant because I was just so uncomfortable sleeping. After a certain time, you can't sleep on your back. You've got to sleep on your side. There's so many things that were stopping me getting sleep, having to get up for a wee, all this kind of stuff. So the night is a really great time to clear some of your head trash. And also because it doesn't make a noise, you can do that while your other half is sleeping next to you. And it really helps you to get to sleep because it calms your body and it calms your mind. So it's helping me to get to sleep in that moment. And that is what you need to do. And you need to stick to it. And that is it. That is how you have a stress-free pregnancy. If you have any questions at all about this, then do get in touch with me. Email me with your questions, specifically asking me what more if you want to know how to have that positive birth experience, how to have a stress-free pregnancy. If there's anything that you haven't fully understood, then please let me know. Email me and let me know what your questions are, and I will do everything I can to help you. Now, as you know, I've been writing a book about having a stress-free pregnancy and a positive birth experience. And you can find out more about that book at fearfreechildbirth.com. And what I've also been preparing is a free email series on how to have a stress-free pregnancy. So if you want to grab my free email series on how to have a stress-free pregnancy, then you can grab that straight away here on the homepage at headtrash.co.uk. Or if you happen to be at the fearfreechildbirth.com website, it's also available there and it's all absolutely free. So it really picks up on some of the main things I cover in my book, actually, which is things like how to avoid due date stress, the 3 things you need to know about pain so you can avoid pain in childbirth, and a lot more. And all that is completely and utterly free, coming straight into your inbox. If you want to sign up for my free email series, then head right over to headtrash.co.uk and let me have your email address, and that will be with you straight away. And also then you can sort of find out more about when the book is ready, if that is something that you're interested in reading. So I hope that today's show's been useful for you. And like I said before, if you have any questions, then you know exactly where to find me. I'm at hello@headtrash.co.uk. Until next time, bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in. You've just been listening to Alexia Leachman here on The Head Trash Show. If you enjoyed the show, she'd really appreciate you leaving a review on iTunes. And don't forget to pop over to www.headtrash.co.uk to get your copy of the free 5 Steps to Clearing Head Trash guide. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes for more strategies, tips and how-tos for clearing your head trash and reclaiming your headspace. Until next time.